we are less than 2 weeks away from Broncos training camp breaking ground, and there is no new deal for Courtland Sutton. So we're going to talk about what that means and whether or not Sutton could get traded, what a trade could look like, as a wild trade idea came in from CBS Sports. So a lot of ground to cover on today's episode. Now, before we get to all that stuff, I do want to remind everyone to go ahead and subscribe. I was looking at the YouTube analytics, and over half of our viewers over the last 28 days are not subscribed. So join the right side of history here. Hit that sub button down below. Lock yourself in for the best Broncos YouTube coverage. Now, before we look at anything, I want to go back in time for a second, because at the end of minicamp, Courtland Sutton spoke to the media, and that was our first time hearing from him amid this stalemate and this, I wouldn't call it a holdout officially, but a soft holdout, because it was all voluntary practices. But a reporter asked him, like, hey, as you guys break for the summer, you get 6 weeks off. If there is no resolution to your contract dispute, will you be here for training camp? And we didn't really get a clear answer from Courtland Sutton. He said, we'll see what happens. I've got a month to be able to get things situated. Hopefully things get situated, because as you all have heard, and I will continue to say, this is where I want to be. Well, that was in the middle of June, and training camp starts July 23rd. It is July 11th. We are less than 2 weeks away, and there has been no update on the Courtland Sutton contract dispute. So to me, that did not sound like a man that was absolute about being here for training camp, which, listen, you can miss mini camp, you can miss OTAs, those are spring practices, no biggie. Training camp, that's a different story. Like, Courtland Sutton, sure, he's no rookie, he's an established player, but you've got a new quarterback in Bo Nix. You've got maybe Jarrett Stidham making his third NFL start for the Broncos. Like, you need to get your number one wide receiver in training camp. The Broncos need Courtland Sutton because they need to have him for Bo Nix. There's just no other way around it. It's that simple. You've got a rookie quarterback. You can't move on from your number one wide receiver if you want that rookie to be successful. You've got to do everything in your power to know whether or not Bo Nix is the guy. And there are always a couple of excuses or reasons that get propped up as to reasons why maybe the quarterback is good, but we didn't see that in his first year or two. And number one on the list is no wide receivers. Number two on the list is bad offensive line. Number three on the list is bad head coach. Well, I'm a believer in Sean Payton being a good coach. I believe in this Broncos offensive line. But if they move on from Courtland Sutton, you can give Bo Nix a pass if he has a rocky first year because he wasn't working with really good wideouts. And ultimately, at that point, you are just wasting your time, because then you bring it back for a second or a third year, and you're hoping with better wide receivers he could improve. And if he doesn't improve, all of a sudden 3 years go down the drain, everyone gets fired, and, well, it's just another season of the Broncos country looking for a playoff appearance for the first time since the Super Bowl. Now, some background on the Sutton contract. He's got 2 years left on his deal, with $13.6 million in cash due for this year and $13 million in cash due for next season. Now, the report that came out a few weeks ago from, I think it was Jeremy Fowler, said that Courtland Sutton is looking to get in the $15-ish million range in cash. So he's looking for $1.5, $2 million raise, give or take. Not earth-shattering money. Now, he's only got $2 million in guarantees left on his contract, so he might also be looking to get some more guarantees for 2025 so that he can be here for the duration of his contract. I will say, as big of a proponent I am as making sure this deal gets situated and Courtland Sutton is in training camp, I am not in favor of giving Courtland Sutton more guaranteed money for 2025. This team finally saw what they paid Courtland Sutton to do in 2021 last year, putting up 10 touchdowns, 772 yards. Up until that point, let's be honest, Sutton had not lived up to that contract extension he got in November of 2021. 4 touchdowns combined in those 2 seasons, 2021 to 2022. But last year, he finally has a monster season. But I don't think we should look at that one season and think, yeah, this is someone we can guarantee will be good in 2024. Like, look at the last 4 years. Which season is the outlier? It's the 2023. Now, I'm optimistic that Courtland Sutton can put together another strong campaign, but I'm not going to bet more money that was already given to him on that assumption. Now, if the Broncos do want to move on from him after this upcoming season, and that's why they're hesitant to give more guaranteed money, it wouldn't be too difficult. He's got a $17.8 million cap hit. That's one of the biggest on the team. There's $14 million in cap savings awaiting them and only a $3.8 million dead cap. So my gut tells me the Broncos aren't looking to add more guaranteed money to 2025 just in case he does not have another 10-touchdown campaign. He'll be approaching 30 years old. There's a lot of cap savings to be had. They may look to hit the reset button at the wide receiver position. But the bottom line that people have to take away from this video is you have to give Bo Nix everything possible to be successful in year one. No, you cannot snap your fingers and get Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase on this team. But you can hold off on a trade and not move on from Courtland Sutton and then turn to Marvin Mims, Josh Reynolds, Tim Patrick as your top 3 wideouts for a rookie receiver. If that is the receiver room for Bo Nix, that is a bottom 3 wide receiver room. And I'm sorry to these guys. I like them. Like Marvin Mims, I think, can have a really special second year. Tim Patrick, I am rooting for him and want to see a miraculous comeback. Josh Reynolds, say something nice about Josh Reynolds. He's really consistent. He'll get you 600 yards, nothing more, nothing less. But this cannot be the ceiling of a wide receiver room for a rookie quarterback. You're just not going to learn what you have in Bo Nix with this type of talent surrounding him. So, do you want Courtland Sutton to remain a Bronco? Like the video if yes, or type N for no. Like one thought that just pops in my head right now about wanting to give Bo Nix the most amount of tools around him to be successful. Take it from like the Chicago Bears, for example, okay? They move on from Justin Fields after 3 years. They get Caleb Williams. But they had the first overall pick in the prior year's draft. But there was really no talk about drafting a quarterback because they didn't know what they had in Justin Fields because they didn't have any good weapons around him. So they make a trade, they go get DJ Moore, and ultimately they decide to move on from Justin Fields. And that cost the Bears a season. Like they wasted their time. Time is precious, especially for GMs and coaches, because time can be taken away from them in an instant. They can get fired at any moment. Now, lucky for the Bears, they may have kind of dodged a bullet because Bryce Young isn't looking all that great. But if Bryce Young turned out to be the next superstar quarterback, and the Bears had the first overall pick and traded it away because they didn't know what they had in Justin Fields, because they did not properly surround him with good players in the first 2 years of his career, like you can look at that and go, that's a mistake made by the Bears, and they could have avoided that mistake if they had surrounded Fields with more weapons. But lucky for them, I don't think they're going to catch any strays or any jokes about passing on Bryce Young, but I don't want Denver to be in that same spot. And they can avoid that by knowing as soon as possible what they have in Bo Nix. And you're not going to know that answer if his top 3 receivers are Marvin Mims, Josh Reynolds, and Tim Patrick. So, with that, we can switch gears and talk about a trade idea involving Courtland Sutton, because CBS Sports put out 3 trade ideas for, I think it was Brandon Aiyuk center, just NFL in general, and one of them included the Broncos. So I wanted to share that with you all here. This was their trade idea. It's a 3-team trade, which, by the way, hardly ever happens. I don't think it's happened in the last 20 years, but it's July 11th. We can have a little fun. So the Broncos get Jamison Crowder and a 3rd-round draft pick from the Commanders. The Commanders get Brandon Aiyuk, and the Niners get Courtland Sutton and a 2nd-round draft pick from Washington. So from the Commanders' perspective, they're the biggest player in all of this. They get Brandon Aiyuk for a 2nd, a 3rd, and Crowder. That's a great deal for them. For the Niners, they don't have to pay Brandon Aiyuk, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, you should want to pay good players if they are good players, and Brandon Aiyuk is a good player. But for the Broncos, they move on from Courtland Sutton. They get a 30-plus-year-old wide receiver at the end of his career and a 3rd-round draft pick. Highly unlikely, but I'm not terribly opposed to this. And I know I just gave a nice tangent about wanting to keep Courtland Sutton. But I do think you can at least acknowledge the fact that a 3rd-round draft pick does have some value, right? And Jamison Crowder is not going to move the needle much for me. But the reality check that Broncos country needs to go through right now is this team is likely not going to be a playoff winning team. Like, maybe they could pull off a miraculous kind of out-of-the-blue Texans 2023 season, but chances are they're not going to the playoffs. They won 8 games last year. They moved on from Justin Simmons, Jerry Jeudy. They bring in a rookie quarterback. There's probably going to be some turbulence on this season, and that's okay. But if we come out of the season knowing, hey, Bo Nix is the guy, that's going to make up for maybe a 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even a 9-win season, right? But if you know you're likely not going to be a playoff team and there's a third-round pick dangling in front of you for an older player, you're going to talk about it. You're at least going to have that conversation. And I think back to the Jerry Jeudy trade. The Browns got Jerry Jeudy for a 5th and a 6th. Remember when this trade went down? I think collectively, all of us thought a 5th and a 6th? Like, it wasn't too long ago that the asking price for Jerry Jeudy was a first rounder going into the 2023 NFL draft. No one offered it. Sure, some teams probably offered something close to it. I know the Browns had pursued the Jerry Jeudy trade prior and probably for more than a 5th and a 6th. But ultimately, Jerry Jeudy's value started to go down. Didn't have a blockbuster 2023 season. Entered the final year of his contract, which was an expensive, fully guaranteed year. So what I don't want to see happen to Denver is if there is a good offer, and a third-round draft pick is something worth talking about, for Courtland Sutton, do you want to hold on to him and then decide after the season is over, yeah, we'll trade him going into the final year. We could have gotten a third at one point. Now we're looking at a 6th-round draft pick. Like, that's some buyer's remorse, or I guess whatever the opposite of buyer's remorse is. Like, I don't want to see that unfold again. Because I remember when the NFL trade deadline passed and Denver didn't sell, I said that was a mistake. And I got ripped apart in the comment section because the Broncos won a couple of games after that. Looking back at it now, I'm sure they wish they got more than a 5th and a 6th-round draft pick for Jerry Jeudy and Justin Simmons, who they ultimately just had to cut outright. Now, what about Jamison Crowder and all this? He's not good anymore. 159 yards last year. He played in all 17 games, didn't make a single start in his return to the Commanders. Now, Jamison Crowder, like you can see in 2020, that was kind of the end of his heyday, 699 yards. We'll call it 700 yards, 6 touchdowns. Like, guys, 700 yards and 6 touchdowns, that's not far off from what Courtland Sutton produced last year, right? He gave you 700-ish yards and 10 touchdowns. Would you rather have a guy for 750 yards and 10 touchdowns or 700 yards and 6 touchdowns plus a third-round draft pick? That third might tilt the scales for 4 extra touchdowns. So in his career, he's had a lot of success. He's been in the league for a long time, going back to like 2015, so coming up on 10 years. 4,800 yards. He's never gone over 1,000 yards in a single season, but for the majority of for the first half of his career, he was a consistent 600 to 800 yard receiver, sometimes even floating into the 900s. So, like, Jamison Crowder has had some good years. It's just that those years are behind him. So, with all this new information, maybe, what do you guys think about this trade? Would you do it? Give me an A for accept or D for decline. Ultimately, I'm not going to have a overly strong opinion on it because we're not going to see a 3-team trade go down, but we could see a 2-team trade go down for Courtland Sutton. And if Denver gets a good return on that, sure, I'll be bummed that they don't have a number 1 wide receiver for Bo Nix. But what's going to soften the blow is a good day 2 draft pick waiting for you next year when, let's be honest, I don't think Courtland Sutton's going to be the difference maker of this team winning a Super Bowl this year. All right, that will do it for us on this edition of the Broncos Breakdown. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. If you have not subscribed, make sure you do so. Lock yourself in for the best free Broncos content, and I'll see you all later.